join. Well, a very good morning to all of you. As I mentioned earlier, we have been talking about the development of literary criticism. We understood the works of criticism or the ideas of Plato, then his disciple Aristotle. Then in yesterday's lecture, I talked about the Roman critics, including Horace and Longinus. And then we went on talking about the critics of the Middle Ages. One critic from from Italy, that is Dante, and his ideas related to the works, the literature, we can say. And then we also talked about Sir Philip Sidney and his work, Defense of Poesy, which is also known as an apology for poetry. And we talked about their ideas. The lectures are available to you people. We went on talking about the neoclassical period as well. Well, after talking about Joseph Addison, now we shall go ahead with another critic of the age of reason, that is Alexander Pope. So you must be familiar with Pope. Pope was one more important figure of the age of reason. He is well known for his essay on criticism, which was published in the year 1711. In this particular work of criticism, essay on criticism, Pope, attempted to codify neoclassical literary criticism. Codify means to present in the form of language. Language is a kind of code. So he presented his views in written language, and he addressed primarily literary critics. He addressed to literary critics. He talked. Had to address means to talk. He talked to literary critics about literature. The main concepts of this particular ideology, Pope's thinking, Pope's literary criticism, have to be understood. This is the golden age of criticism, you know, uh, and the neoclassical school or the age of reason. Actually, they are similar. Believed that the golden age of criticism is the classical age. I had mentioned it yesterday. They thought that in order to understand literature, one has to go back to the classical criticism. So for them, the golden age of criticism or the classical age, the age of Homer, Aristotle, Horace, and Longinus. And these critics, Homer, Aristotle, Horace, Longinus, discovered the truth about, unerring nature. For them, nature never commits any mistake. So to err means to commit mistake. And they talked about the truth of nature. According to Pope, a good poet, I again would like to remind you that here poet means author, any writer. Okay. It is a general term used in those days. A good poet needs to be natural genius, and a good poet should have knowledge of classics and understanding of the rules of poetry. So this school of criticism insisted on what we call the ideal, and they thought that a poet should be genius, should have knowledge of classics, he should be a well-read person. At the same time, a poet must have an understanding of the rules of poetry. A poet should balance himself through politeness and grace in terms of style. In the means in style, he should be polite. His style should be graceful. And Pope emphasizes on defining the boundaries of style. Means he thinks that there are certain boundaries of style. A poet should attempt to define this style, these boundaries, and make his literary theory a rhetoric one. Means Pope tried to just define the boundaries of style. As you know, he said a style should be polite and graceful, and at the same time, his literary theory was a kind of rhetoric. Rhetoric means a science of speech. When you talk, you follow certain rules. So it was a kind of address to the literary critics. And the works of such poets who are naturally genius, who have the knowledge of classics, who have the understanding of the rules, who balance themselves through politeness and grace. Such poets seek to reaffirm truths or absolutes already discovered by the classical writers. That was the belief of Alexander Pope. The poets who have all these qualities, they try to seek or reaffirm truth or absolute. Absolutes means the very meaning of life, we can say, the very meaning of our existence. And these absolutes were already discovered, found by classical writers. Therefore, they believed this school of criticism, literature as well. Yesterday I mentioned, actually, Alexander Pope was a poet, Dryden was a poet, and then Addison was an essayist. All of them wrote, essays, poetry, etc. At the same time, they were good critics as well. And they thought, Pope himself thought that the new poets should try to imitate the classical poets. So their criticism can be called as a mimetic criticism or mimetic theory. Mimesis was the term used in Greek language to mean an imitation. Okay, so imitation of the ancients. The catchword of this school was follow the ancients, follow Homer, follow Aristotle, Horace, and Longinus, etc. Because they discovered the truth of nature. They reaffirm, means the truth was already discovered. Just these poets, the new poets, have to reaffirm truths or absolutes. Okay, and according to Pope, the task of the critic is to validate and maintain classical values. So these are actually the classicists in that way. They thought that the critic should validate. Validate means to again reaffirm, to confirm, and even maintain the standards, classical values. Because in those days, in 18th century, a very drastic shift was taking place in culture. So cultural change were taking place. And in this scenario, it was the task of the critic to validate and maintain classical value. That's what Pope felt. So Pope is one of the uh, critics who defines and defends good taste and cultural values, just like Dryden, Horace, Longinus, and other critics, classical critics. Aristotle himself was of the same opinion. And Pope, was basically interested in literary taste. Literary taste means the quality of literature. And we should understand his ideas, his criticism, his essay and criticism, uh, in the context of literary criticism. When we examine his essay and criticism, we get insights. Now we get insights into the 18th century thought and literary criticism. We understand what they thought, what they uh, expected. Okay, this is how we understand Alexander Pope and his essay on criticism as one of the important contribution in the development of literary criticism.